So I'm going to start with a disclaimer, or rather, why are we here after lunch? This isn't really a report from the field. This is an opinion piece. So to those who have heard my opinion, perhaps don't want to hear it again, by all means, go have a nap. And it is also building on some work that Taariq was doing with AI. But this is very much a snapshot. And I want to explain why we agreed to come in with the work, frankly, not yet done, and really very much in its infancy of actually an idea that we're working up, is because we felt that we needed to say something important to DMPonline right now in the middle of this AI acceleration. So if we can take a look to the next slide. We think, I would like to say as a member of the DMPonline community, that there is a challenge right now to DMPonline. We've always had a problem with tick box DMPs being created. We think that there's a very, very serious possibility that the tick box problem just got a lot worse. It's also got to do, and I am indebted to other people for my understanding for the state of copyright and authorship. And we have a suggestion as to what DMPonline should do. And we have some very little, very basic, small data collection that we did to back up our already existing intuition. So it was totally biased. Okay, if we can move on, and Taariq will come in on this one.
Thanks, Nina, and nice to meet everybody around the world. I hope you know that South Africa is the bottom corner and point of Africa as a whole, so we're very far from everybody. But Wits University is highly ranked as one of the top research universities in the world. So yeah, I think we've got a fair bit to contribute. We're struggling a little bit today in that the undersea cables sometimes give trouble, so internet is not always the greatest. I know we do send out ships to fix these optic cables, so things will get better. But anyway, just a bit of context of what I do and why I started chatting with Nina about this. I know Nina for many years, but this subject specifically is interesting to me because I'm trying to figure out how to reverse engineer something that an AI bot would give out to us. So you may put into a bot like ChatGPT or Grammarly or something like that. Please write for me an abstract on this, and it'll go out and do it. So the easiest ways to find out some of these things is that you can see the change of language from how somebody normally writes to how this was written. And the hard ways is when it sounds almost the same like they do, but something tells you that it's not right. So I'm trying to do reverse engineering. And that may sound interesting enough and easy enough, but imagine people who would use first ChatGPT, then they'll take it to Grammarly, then they'll take it to any other AI bot out there, so that it becomes more and more scrambled. So now you're so many versions away from the beginning that it becomes very difficult. And it's not like we want to catch people. We know people are doing it. I teach my students how to use it responsibly, and how to get good help out of it rather than trying to get it to write your papers and that for you. So that's where this started with, and it's very new for me. I haven't got any real results yet. As Nina says, it's a lot of this is just our opinion. And later on, when we show you some of our examples in the slides, just accept it with a handful of salt. Okay, so getting into this now, the large language models, how do they work? So what these things do is they scrape as much information as you can from the internet and from bodies of knowledge, from journals, from everything that they can. And they bring this all together, and they are obviously able to search this much faster than we can as human beings, and they try and construct something out of it. Okay, this is useful when we try to develop corpora, corpus project that we worked on a few years ago. You can find it listed online, because just translating words does not make a language, does not absorb the culture or anything like that. So that's where this AI comes in and helps us to do that. So when I'm writing a paper for an African context, it may sound a little different from I would in an American or a European context. So that's what these AIs try to do rather than just regurgitate and bring back everything for you. Okay. They attempt to understand and generate human-like text. Another important point about this is that it wants to sound like a human. That's why I say it's not very easy to pick this up. And the easiest way to pick up is the way I speak and write now will be very different from what the AI originally does. But you can carry on training it and put more of your thoughts into it and more of your scripts into it, and it'll come back with something that sounds like you. Okay. Relies on complicated algorithms. Basically, what the people who generate and come up with these AI things do is they try and think how human beings would think. And neural networks with forward and backward propagation is the way they do it. Don't want to go too much into that, but just as how you build and build and build and build and go forward into developing your thought and your thought process, which is called propagation, which can happen going forward and coming backwards, going back into the past kind of thing. They use these type of things. Stronger computers, faster computers, more powerful high performance computing means you can go further forward and further backwards in terms of your thinking. Generally now there's 1, 2, 3 propagation, forward and backward propagation, but that doesn't stop there. Good example, if you want to understand this, is how Kasparov and other great chess players can think 7 or 8 moves ahead, whereas the IBM Blue computer could do thousands of moves ahead when they were challenging him. So that thousands is that propagation forward and versus humans when trying to solve problems. Okay. The last point I put into the slide before I hand back over to Nina is about mature AI bots that rely on models they previously built. So what I'm talking about here is these things are constantly training and they're constantly waiting. When I say waiting, I mean like physical weights, like 50% of my answers should be related to academic bodies of knowledge, while 20% is to modern media, right? So they build these things and they say, I'm not being re-asked this question, which means I'm now happy that this model I've built works pretty well and I can carry on presenting answers using this model. Becomes very important when the hallucination but comes in somewhere down towards the end. Nina, back over to you.
Right. So ideally, this is what should happen when a research data manager or steward, like we were hearing about earlier from Delft, does a DMP with a researcher. And I think one of the things that I want to say here is we have been very concentrated on DMPs because of all these things that are happening. In fact, the document itself was never producing all of those things. It was the process of writing the document that was producing those things. And we knew that, but perhaps we didn't know it as acutely as AI now tells us that we know it. What we thought was going on in a DMP is actually not what was going on in a DMP. It was the process of writing the DMP that made all those things happen. And if suppose that one of the things that we could say here, one of the ways forward, would be to say that the document itself, which is now so easily generated, needs to perhaps be separated from those other things that we do. In particular, insisting on compliance, challenging research solutions, and oversight. Or perhaps that is the job of the ethics committees. I'm not sure. Let's go ahead. So I know Angela Talley's in the room, so speak up if I'm wrong. But as our current understanding stands, there is no authorship in AI. And it is understood in effect as a reworking of a variety of original authors. In the case of DMPs in particular, I believe, I am not certain, I believe that the DMPs we're seeing being written by AIs actually coming from a fairly small number of sources. And my suspicion suspicion or understanding is that we haven't come to terms with the plagiarism problem to the extent to which this is plagiarism. I think that there are occasions where it is less plagiarism and more just English writing, and there are cases where in effect we are looking at automated plagiarism. I don't know how we feel about that. Does it matter? We're open access people. Does it matter if something is plagiarized? If it comes up with a good DMP, does it matter that the DMP was plagiarized? I don't know. It's not a decision that's been made, and I know that there are legal cases happening at the moment which will change that story. So can we go ahead? We're not lawyers, just to say. Okay, so here's our opinion piece. This is why we put in after lunch to wake everybody up. Our opinion is this. Taariq, if you want to come in at this point, we don't think we should have open data management plans at the moment. We think that we should be putting on non-derivative licenses. We think that we should not have the open plans that we have. We think people should be a bit more cautious about allowing those plans and templates to be scraped. We think that we are creating a situation in which we're just automating our process and our solutions. If you're okay with that, if that's what we want to go forward, then we need to say that. But the reason why we agreed to talk, when frankly we are very much at the beginning of this kind of project and this is not finished, is that it's really a case of act now or it's too late. I am advocating that as of this moment in time, and we could change that later on, as of this moment in time, a lot of data and a lot of data management plans should be explicitly not licensed for AI generation. If you want to make an AI, then license it for an AI, but don't let it be scraped. As nature pours a vacuum, so engineers will vacuum up open data. We cannot just ignore this. I agree, there's a lot of hype, but we cannot just ignore this. We have to, in this community, make even an interim decision about what we're doing about AI, creating DMPs, and we have to make it now. Because now it's happening. But as I said to third time, this talk isn't finished. It isn't even ready. But it's urgent, so we came. And I will tell you why I think this. Let's go on. To the next slide. And Taariq, I don't know if you want to come in on a bit more of why we are worried.
Okay, carry on. I'll jump in when I need to.
Okay. So why are we worried? Let's go on. Here's a scenario. And by the way, I did plagiarize this from our data workshop. Thank you very much. Researcher uses a DMP, submits a grant. Researcher uses AI to write the DMP, submits a grant. Grant is funded, and the researcher reads a DMP for the first time. But the DMP doesn't work because it was never really considered. It didn't go through all those initial processes. It was generated and it sounds completely plausible, but it doesn't work. And the DMP isn't executed. Is that a problem? Well, it's kind of academic misconduct. And it's a kind of academic misconduct we could have happen being very common and not very malicious. But some could write a DMP, not really read it, not do it at the current moment. So just to acknowledge that. To move on to the next scenario. Let's suppose that not only didn't they read it, didn't they write it, but then generate it. It was generated by a PhD who threw it in. And then, you know, the collaboration fell apart. And the senior researcher says, I'm not responsible for what an AI generated. It's especially, I like to point out that the AI-generated DMPs tend to be an amalgamation. So we're actually working on trying to reverse engineer how these things are working. Partly because at the University of Witwatersrand, we can't afford them. So they have to reverse them. So our interest was sparked by where are these being generated from or out of? And you'll notice that these DMPs tend to be very blanket open access. They're not very good, depending obviously on how you prompt them. They are quite good as you keep going forward, as Taariq was saying, as you keep propagating them. By the way, you can get far better DMPs. And one of the suggestions is that DMPonline consider a chatbot that basically does a question and answer session.
So let me come in a little bit here, just very practically. What happens with these type of examples is that academics could end up committing resources from the university that don't exist. For example, I don't offer cloud-based storage at all. All my storage for Wits University is on-site because we can't afford the cloud options. So you know, the AI may just go and do that, and the academic who submitted the DMP is none the wiser. Another example is that it'll come back and say, we will comply with everything GDPR, and it'll mention nothing about POPI. So POPI is South Africa's version of the GDPR. They are primarily the same, but there are subtle differences, and they will just submit that and accept that. Something else they could do is commit to sharing in a way that we're not comfortable with. Because we've got very specific matter transfer agreements for our university, which are specific because of the demographic makeup of our country and what our government requires from us, which may not be covered comfortably within an AI. Just some practical examples. Back to you, Nina.
Yeah, let's go on to the next one. But basically, yes, we noticed in particular AI seem to be strongly open access, not really good on or they'll say things like we'll be completely open access while protecting personal property. So I don't know if anybody else would like to come in on what they think can go wrong at this point.
I'm gonna make a very small joke. So we asked the AI to develop our presentation. So if anything's wrong with it, we don't take any responsibility. I'm kidding.
No, actually, if we had asked the AI, it would have been better. But it wasn't developed, sadly, by us. Okay, let's go on.
Yeah.
Okay, we went, okay, let's stop speculating, let's start experimenting. Because we've been discussing dealing with this. And I have had some things come across my desk that I thought, I wonder if a human wrote this. So we decided to go on. So we took 5 open plans from DMPonline. We just used what we had access to. Honestly, I think you would have gotten very different results from more specialized GTPs, but we got what we got. Okay. And then going on. So that was our prompt.
Just read it. Go back there, please, Nina. So very specifically, because maybe you'd want to play with some of these things on your own and see what it does in more examples, right? So we asked the AI robot to write us a data management plan for funder, whichever funder, Wellcome, Gates Foundation, NRF, the South African ones, whatever. So funder would be replaced with that based on the project's abstract. So we copied the full abstract in from what was available on DMPonline and put it in there. So that's what we asked it to do for each of the 5. Okay, Nina, go on.
By the way, yeah, the project abstracts were probably more information than our hypothetical researcher might actually use. But so let's go on. So question of the primary function of concern here is, does it hallucinate? And obviously we know about hallucinations, but I just want to point out specifically with DMPs where the hallucinations comes in. It's very specifically in creating certain kinds of information, very plausible certain kinds of information. And we were wondering just how much it would do that. And the answer is, oh yes, it did that. Let's go on. A lot. But in very small ways. It said that there would be golden access in one of them. It said that it suggested, it had the kind of standard thing of, we'll use security protocol. But the security protocol it inserted was a AWS security protocol that wouldn't have actually applied to that university, and I think is expired. It put in retention periods that are standard but were wrong for that particular funder. What else was there, Taariq?
Well, I've actually mentioned a couple. It promised cloud storage solutions, whereas technically you shouldn't have it. It had its own tenure for embargo periods and that which were against what the funder would have wanted, things like that.
Yeah, so those were the devil in the details. They were always very plausible, actually, very possible. It was kind of a fill in the blank, put something in, but it wasn't actually correct. And it wasn't that easy to spot. I guess that was one of the reasons we started to have concern. It wasn't that easy to spot.
And in fact, I changed the prompt. I didn't capture any of those findings here, but I changed the prompt. I think I changed it from to and with or something like that. Just off the top of my head, and I asked it again to do the search, and all it did was change that word for me and present the same skills.
Some of them, the same phrases started coming up over and over again. The same solutions. So it said, one of the things it said a lot of was that it was going to de-identify audio. And then it actually explained how it was going to de-identify audio, but it wasn't de-identifying audio. It was supposedly de-identifying transcripts. It seemed to us, we don't know, and this is why we are appealing in the DMPonline community for us to really think, do we want to unintentionally do we want to, without having thought it through, allow this explosive in the wild experiment to run or not? Because that is what's going on. So, sorry, what we mean by hallucinate is it's a term used, actually, maybe Taariq, you can define it better.
Go for it. Go for it.
No, well, I'll try, but I think this is more your area. In that sense, hallucinate is, it makes things up, but not in terms of fiction. it's almost a byproduct of the process. So it imputes information. You can see it putting two pieces of information together, and there's like this missing bit, and then it creates something in the space of the missing bit. Taariq, do you want to talk more about technically how hallucinations occur?
Yeah. So what the bot does is it makes assumptions, okay? And these assumptions can change over time the more people ask the bot to the same type of questions. Like, for example, Nina and I probably trained ChatGPT, Grammarly, Copilot, and that because we kept on asking it the same question just with slightly different data. So the bot was then just saying, oh, okay, they want to know this, and I've given them this answer, but they didn't ask me that question again. They just asked me the same question, but on a different set of data. So it's starting to think that I'm giving the right answers. Now, that's the background and the context. So what exactly is hallucinations? The examples I was giving, that it says we will embargo data for 10 years. That's a hallucination because the funder actually says you will embargo for 3 years and 3 years only while you do secondary and tertiary research. After that, it becomes open access. So now the bot never bothered going to the funder's database and saying, 3 years is the right answer. It assumed 10 years all the time. Another example
But it was actually the 10-year thing was remarkably persistent. Every single DMP that we created had 10 years.
Yeah, and it's probably our fault. Had we changed our prompt and said, do this according to so-and-so's requirements, ensuring
no, actually, Taariq, sorry, we did. Remember, last night we had this discussion. Then last night I went back and did that, and it still did 10 years.
Okay, fine. Sorry, I didn't see those results. But the point I'm trying to make is it'll make assumptions, right? Those assumptions will seem realistic. They would be perfectly plausible. And if you read it without knowing the background and history, you will accept them as real and you will carry on. Like offering cloud storage, whereas I don't offer cloud storage. Embargo periods, like referencing GDPR, but not Poppy. I'm just reading the question here again.
Yes, correct. That's what it's doing, and then it is imputing the information because DMPs are so structured after all. Sorry, so let's just quickly go on to the next one.
Sorry, but I'm happy with that, Jan. With the answer we've given.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you.
So this was, I can't explain to you how rough this was. Do not ask us for our raw data.
Let's put it's extremely subjective.
Yes.
Okay, but I will qualify my statements of subjectivity. In a DMP of say 10 different areas, and I have from DMPonline what the answers I expected to get. I ran through it and said, okay, from these 10, these 8 were minimally addressed or these were incomplete, and then I judged the performance of the AI bot on that. So it's still rough, it is still subjective. I would have to completely write pages on to disclaim exactly how I did this as a scientific review, which we didn't do for this, but we're just trying to get people to think in this way going forward and probably do better jobs than we can. All right, Nina, back to you. Yeah.
I'm not going to dwell on this because, like I said, this was just a very, very rough thing that we threw together to see what would come out if we did. If we can go forward. So I don't know what the questions are because I know that we need to finish soon, but I'm just going to end with the same thing that we began with. This is not a report. This is an opinion piece. From us working in a different area and just coming across this and saying to specifically the DMPonline and the DMPonline community, either we are out there training these multitude of bots or we're not. And my sense at the moment is that we shouldn't be. I don't like what I'm seeing. I don't like the process. I don't like what it's doing to or for researchers. I've got to say, though, it produces sometimes a very, very good DMP. And I think that with more questions added and more prompts, you could get probably a very good DMP. But I do think that we need to close the open DMPs to training. I think that we need to consider how much we want those plans and templates out. And I think that we need to consider this in the light of researchers who are putting in more and more grants, highly stressed for time, and the kinds of pressures that they're sitting under.
And we as research managers have to help them and teach them how to use these tools in a better way. Rather than generate for you, it's here's my data, or here's what I've said, help me say it better.
So this is, as we said, final line, this is our opinion. And we really feel that the people who gave their consent, generously gave their consent within the open access movement, gave their consent, shared their plans, didn't intend this, that what I'm seeing. And it actually makes me quite angry. I don't think that the people who generously shared their plans to help other researchers intended to make money for OpenAI. And that's what it's coming down to. And we see an equity problem here. Maybe we are a bit attuned to equity, but we see an equity problem here because something else is this. Across Southern Africa, my university where I come from, people cannot pay for AIs. They will be using free versions, significantly worse. Researchers with either co-pilot licenses or other licenses will have those licenses and will produce these. Certainly the researchers who don't do this will be competing against the bots happening at faster and faster rates and very, very plausible. And if the peer reviewers are also bots, I mean, and then you've got a researcher whose second language is English. So that is why we took your time this morning and we jumped in to say, hey, right now, we suggest there is a problem. And unless you do something right now, by the time you decide to do something, all of those plans will have already been scraped into training bots, and there will be grant generator AIs. And if you have the money to do that, you will get the grant, and those who don't will not. So that is the end of our soapbox. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And many thanks to Taariq as well. Nice to meet you, and many thanks to Nina. I don't know whether there are any questions currently in the chat, and I'll also stop sharing my screen. There we go, so I can see you. So there was a comment from Deanna, but you did explain what you meant by hallucinations. Are there any questions in the room, or I have not checked the Google document yet with the shared notes?
There are none there. I mostly took the notes.
Thank you.
Okay, so, Federico Grassatoro raised. Okay, I'll wait with my questions.
Hello, can you hear me and see me?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So I see your point, but how would that work retroactively with all the DMPs that have already been used to train the LLMs?
Well, now this is where the lawyers in the room have to come in. But there is a case for authorship and copyright. There is a case for going back to those that have been used and saying that actually this was a misuse. But there is certainly a case for stopping now. DMPs go quickly out of date as the 10-year thing. It was very noticeable to us generating DMPs that they seemed a bit older. If we stop sharing them with LLMs now, it will become clearer that these are older. in terms of what's been shared already, I don't know what the legal remedies are. And in many cases, it did say they were open, even if this wasn't a use case that any researcher who's given their consent had actually ever intended. So I don't know if there's lawyers in the room would have to answer that question.
I also think that communities in universities are going to have to come up with their own policies in terms of IP and integrity and all of that kind of thing. Because you can't stop it. We all know that you can't stop it. But the least you can do is tell people what is acceptable in doing it.
And there is no acknowledgement at all in these things. It's truly disassembles acknowledgement. Sorry, I think Angela has certainly more to say about this than me is coming in.
Hi, thank you so much, Nina and Taariq. That's a fantastic piece of work that you've been doing. And actually, yeah, plenty that I could say about it, but I just wanted to kind of respond briefly to the last point, as I am a legal academic and do some work in this area.
Thank you, I'm not.
So I think, firstly, there is a case in the US that's working its way through the courts around the extent to which training large language models with openly available data and resources is illegal with regards to copyright, or is falls within the US defense to copyright infringement of fair use, which is quite an expansive defense, as some of you may well be aware. So I suppose we'll see kind of how that goes and works its way through the courts there. And given that most of, or a lot of the large language models that we use are kind of US based, even if many of us are not in the US, that case will have quite a big impact, I think, on how large language models are operating. But I think Nina's totally right about the equity issues, of course, in many respects here. And I think when it comes to one aspect around open access or openly available data or resources, I think you're both absolutely right in terms of these weren't, the uses to train large language models weren't really foreseen by whoever was making that data available or those resources available. And of course, many of you will be familiar with things like the Creative Commons licenses and free and open source software licenses. So I guess there are some licenses that can be used to limit, for instance, commercial use of openly available data and resources. But in order to enforce that, then you would have to, I don't know, take OpenAI to court, which may not be a particularly easy thing to do. But this is a long-standing issue for these sorts of licenses, is kind of enforcing the terms of them, particularly against large and powerful adversaries. Yeah, more of a comment than anything else, but I really do see these as being huge issues at the moment. And yes, there is the case in the US, but I think there is a lot, these issues are broader than that. And I think Nina is also right. My personal opinion is that she's right in terms of, from now onwards, how do you, or to whom might you restrict access, and on what basis? I really think that people need to think about this much more carefully now, given the fact that actually data and resources that have been put online are making money for other people, whereas before they were sort of shared in a more they're still shared in an altruistic way, but they actually are much more valuable resource than perhaps we understood before. So yeah, I'll leave that for now, but thanks very much.
Thank you, Angela. So if we can move to the next question, Joachim.
Yeah, I first want to thank Nina and Taariq again for bringing this subject up at all. Just a comment that we don't usually force any researcher or even recommend them to publish their DMPs, but we certainly as I understand now, have a responsibility to make them aware of the risks if they choose to do so. And that is what I will take back home and work on, giving your example here. So thank you again.
Thank you.
I think what we are suggesting is just off the top of our heads, ND licenses. We're also suggesting that DMPonline in particular revise some of the degree of its openness. What are we suggesting from now on? We are suggesting humans talk to humans, but not via the mechanism of a downloadable access. So I guess we're suggesting registration. That's the limit. So this was very much an opinion piece. It wasn't like we came with a full study and we looked at all the solutions and we're coming with a solution, because we are not that right now. We came to say this is moving fast and universities move slow and policies take time, and that's good. But in the meantime, these things are hoovering up information we won't get back. So I do think perhaps it's time to press pause on the sharing button. Not forever, but pause.
Okay.
Right. Sorry, Magdalena, I have a few questions.
No, please go
Okay.
ahead, Diana. I was going to just invite the room and ask you because you seemed you were having a question for Nina. So go ahead, Diana.
No, if somebody else has questions, go ahead. I'm happy to wait. I can ask them afterwards. Okay, in that case, I'll go ahead. So, plan visibility settings in DMPonline. So initially, we made public DMPs. And this was, as you say, a generous gesture where researchers can make very good examples of data management plans publicly available. And by publicly, we mean to the whole wide world. They're not just seen within DMPonline or by organizations, they're seen by everybody. You can go at the tool homepage and click on resources, public DMPs, and everybody can see them. Are you suggesting that we should put a stop on that altogether?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I know it's controversial,
Go
but
ahead.
yes, I am, because I have seen that in specific DMPonline is being used.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the public DMP, in your opinion, should disappear. Now that there are other issues here that
until we can, our slow academic processes and proper research can catch up with where we are.
Okay. There is of course a share button, but the share button has a different purpose. This is to be shared by researchers within a project, and that requires a logging in. That requires you to have an account. Those are not available for public scraping. We can't prevent, or I don't think we should prevent, researchers who work on large collaborative projects from sharing the plan.
No, that's not what I'm suggesting.
Yeah. Okay. Just to make that clear, because there is plan sharing and co-editing, and then there's public plans. These are two different things.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting the public plans are not being used for the purposes for which they're intended, have some potentially deleterious side effects. But I'm not suggesting that it may well be there's arguments on the other side. I think we don't know enough, but we know enough to say, let's pause.
One other question that I have is, so you said you trained this model, the model must have been trained on bigger data, but you only used 5 public DMPs and you got relatively good hallucinations.
Yes. No, we got some relatively good plans.
Okay.
What
data did you train your model on? Because that would require a lot more.
No, we used the public model we had available to us. Taariq doesn't have access to any paid model, so he just used the free models available to us. And we
So
just
in terms of data collection, these bots go and grab everything from any corner of the internet that is publicly available.
Okay.
So when we're saying I didn't give it data to train it, right? It had data, DMP data from around the world. But what I meant when I said I was training it is that because I kept on asking it the same question, our prompt from our slides, but on different abstracts, it started assuming, oh, okay, I think I'm giving this guy the right answers that he wants. So let me just give him the answers on that model now on the new data he's given to me. So it still firstly developed its idea based on everything from around the world. But then it started saying, okay, he likes this answer. He's not asking me to rethink it. Let me give him the same answer for the next 4.
So we noticed the same phrases
Yeah.
in all our things just came up over and over again. Password protected laptop, password protected laptop, password protected laptop. So retain for 10 years, retain for 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Diana?
But in
Yes.
where we could actually track where the information was coming from, our question was it from DMPonline? And the answer was yes.
Right.
DMPonline and certain library.
Okay, DMPonline community, how do you feel about this?
That's wake you up after lunch. That's what I'm opening up to the community. This is not research. Do not ask me my research. This is opinion.
Joachim has his hands up. Joachim?
I would just like to connect this issue to the previous issue of machine actionable DMPs.
Yes, that's
because
exactly.
I made personally a small test with asking only ChatGPT to give me the contents of a few DOIs, and one was wrong and another one was completely made up because it didn't exist after all. And I mean, if you have in the DMP a DOI that is wrong, you will get a wrong answer from the bot, or you will risk having the wrong answer. So it will give it opportunity to hallucinate further using machine actionable DMPs.
Look, I guess for those of us who are in compliance, who work around compliance, and who have been told in many investigations that the core of academic misconduct often starts not with ill intention, but with overworked researchers with very little time, taking a shortcut, looking at a shortcut is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Philippa, you have been patient having your hand up.
Thank you. I'm going to argue the other way. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I feel like it feels very knee-jerk to me, and that we're fearful of the technology, and so we're trying to lock everything down instead of changing the culture. If we flooded the world with good DMPs, that would be a better solution. If we lock everything down, are we just allowing this new technology, which doesn't really have malintent, but can have bad applications, govern how we operate as a community? So I learned how to write a DMP by looking at other people's DMPs. So if we start closing that off, are we actually making it more equal, or are very well-resourced centers, where there are lots of people with lots of knowledge, getting better and better? and those of us who are actually learning online losing our access to where we could do that learning.
Nice point, Philip. A nice counter argument. I like it. One risk with letting this continue without us trying to guide it forward is we're going to end up with just everybody having the same thing. Everybody's going to rely on a tool to produce a DMP. Then the person or bot sitting on the other side reading it is not going to be able to distinguish from that perspective, which is the better proposal.
Yeah, so if you sit in an institution reviewing DMPs, you see a lot come through that are obviously not written, but they're cut and pasted from everywhere. And if that's the way that person is going to work, are we going to change that behavior by limiting AI? And you know, the ones we sit down and have a conversation with, yeah, it's better. But when do we close down access to AI? Do we throw them towards the conversation? I don't know that we do. You know, I
was suggesting pause.
Yes, I like pause better than stop.
I believe that you may well be right. There is an argument on the other side, but I am suggesting pause because we're in the hoovering up stage of AI. If we follow that hype thing, I'm suggesting pause until the hype thing levels out and we are able to engage with it in a more usable way. Or I'm suggesting that DMPonline does its own AI. I either one of those. I see your point, and I'm not suggesting that those not be accessible to people. I'm suggesting that you put a registration barrier between it and a lazy web scraper.
Yeah. I suppose what I'm thinking about is just some sort of a balance. We know that bad things will happen. Where is the balance falling? And like you say, we can pause until we work it out. But I'd hate to think that we would stop everything just in case it goes wrong.
I agree with you, and I think that the hallucination problem is probably fixable because it's being fixed right now.
Thank you. There was a comment in the chat by Mari, already also answered by Federico. But Federico, you're having your hand up, so I'll let you to be the last person to ask a question before we wrap up the session. So go ahead, Federico.
Hello again. Just to make sure that I'm understanding your suggestions, because I think I agree with them. You're not saying that the DMPonline tool should stop sharing DMPs. What it means is you stop sharing them openly, so then machines cannot scrape them. Yes. And maybe that can be translated into a request DMP with someone that has already been logged in, something like that. So then we don't really close the option of Philippa saying learning from other DMPs, but we close the option of the machine scraping them and doing whatever they want with it while we decide which licenses are we applying or how are we gonna tackle all this problem from a policy level. Is that what we
that is a far better way than me and Taariq were edging our way towards that. I think that's a more succinct way of putting it. Yes, right. That is what we're suggesting, and we are suggesting it urgently. Because tomorrow may be too late. It has already downloaded it and it's part of a set that's already there for eternity.
Okay.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I do apologize, but I do think we'll have to slowly wrap up. Thank you so much for the thought-provoking discussion. It's been very interesting, and I bet there are people having more and more questions, but please, if you have more questions, just drop them into the shared Google Notes, and we'll try to share these if there are any more points with you, Nina and Taariq.
And then we'll go and do actual research and answer them.
No, but thank you so much, and thank you, Nina and Taariq, for your time to be our speakers and sharing your insights into the topic.